On February 22, 2024, history was made. After more than half a century, NASA once again returned to the Moon. However, while the ODIS space probe successfully landed on our celestial neighbor as planned, the mission was far from flawless, quite the opposite, in fact. The first commercial lunar lander seemed to break a leg a bit too literally, tipping over on its side due to a bent landing leg. Despite this mishap, Odysseus managed to capture images of the Moon during its short-lived mission, earning its place in history as a significant achievement. We all recognize the names Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, but what about Harrison Schmitt and Eugene Cernan? While the Apollo 11 astronauts were the first humans to set foot on another world, Cernan and Schmitt became the last to explore the Moon up close on December 14, 1972. Today, as the USA and China compete in what could be called a second space race, both striving for a return to the lunar surface, it's worth noting that in all these years, NASA had not accomplished a soft, unmanned moon landing until now. So far, only a few probes have successfully accomplished this feat, including China's Chang'e lander, India's Chandrayaan-3, and Japan's Slim lander, though the latter ended up landing upside down on the lunar surface. To re-establish its presence in the realm of unmanned lunar landings, NASA has turned to commercial partners for support. Unfortunately, the launch of the Parag Green space capsule, developed by the U.S. company Astrobio XS in January last year, ended in failure. A fuel leak and other technical issues forced the mission to be aborted shortly after liftoff. However, just weeks later, on February 15, 2024, it was ODIS' turn to take center stage, with hopes of achieving a smoother outcome. The 2-ton, 4-meter-high lunar lander was developed by the space exploration company Intuitive Machines. Following its launch aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, everything proceeded as planned. Carrying scientific instruments from NASA and private contributors, the ODIS lander wasn't designed to revolutionize lunar exploration but rather to support preparations for the Artemis mission and the future of commercial space travel. Once again, mission controllers selected Malapert crater near the lunar South Pole as the landing site. In true 2024 fashion, ODIS captured several selfies along its journey, more accurately, panoramic images featuring parts of the probe alongside its distant blue home. However, when the crucial moment arrived, Steve Altemus, CEO of Intuitive Machines, had to announce that ODIS had not landed upright as intended but instead had come to rest at a slight angle on the Moon's surface. The exact cause of this issue was still unknown at the time of the press conference. Initially, the company had stated on X that ODIS had landed upright and had already begun transmitting data. Marking humanity's return to the Moon after more than 50 years, the ODIS mission was not without its challenges. Even before its unexpected tipping on February 21, the probe had fired its engines to enter a low lunar orbit. These engines, fueled by liquid methane and oxygen, played a crucial role in the necessary braking maneuvers. However, the sensors, also vital for the landing sequence, failed to function correctly. In response, the ground team opted to rely on a NASA-developed system. Specifically, they activated the Navigation Doppler LAR, a laser-based sensor originally included on the spacecraft for testing purposes. Given its experimental nature, the system was designed to assess the distance to the ground and analyze the landing site using laser beams and their reflections. As a result, ODIS first had to complete an orbit around the Moon to allow the LAR system sufficient time to prepare. As previously mentioned, the landing was expected to be successful, one way or another. Initially, the reason for the probe's tilted position was unclear, but the first camera images soon provided clarity. These images revealed that ODIS was leaning approximately 30 degrees to one side on the lunar surface due to a bent landing leg. The damage was most likely caused by an excessively high descent speed, as the ODIS system led to a descent 3 times faster than intended. Additionally, the probe drifted sideways, preventing a perfectly vertical touchdown and resulting in a much harder landing than planned. Despite this setback, there was good news. Although ODIS faced significant challenges, its scientific instruments largely functioned as expected. Fortunately, the payloads designated for post-landing data collection were not located on the side of the probe that made direct contact with the Moon. However, the incident did have consequences, most notably, the main antenna, intended for broadband transmissions, was misaligned due to the tip-over. As a result, initial data transmission relied on the weaker low-gain antenna, causing a slight delay in receiving the first images. Nevertheless, experts were able to optimize the transmission process for ELI, ensuring smoother communication. At first glance, the image might seem like a photograph of the Sun setting over the lunar horizon. In reality, it is a farewell snapshot of the Moon. ODIS had already completed its active phase on the night of March 1, 2024, not due to another flip, but because of the onset of the lunar night. The reason the Intuitive Machines ground team placed the probe into hibernation is straightforward. Without sunlight, its solar panels could no longer generate power. Still, at that time, experts remained hopeful that Otis might awaken after the 2-week lunar night and resume operations, much like Japan's Slim lander had done before. However, the real awakening happened on Earth, where ground stations faced disappointment. Attempts to reactivate Otis at lunar noon, when the sun was at its highest point above its location, were unsuccessful. Unfortunately, the probe's battery and electronic components could not withstand the extreme cold of the lunar night, with temperatures dropping below -100°C. With no signal received between March 20th and 23rd, Intuitive Machines officially declared the mission concluded. So, how should Otis's lunar journey be assessed? Given its damaged landing leg, sensor failure, and data transmission issues, some might assume the mission was a failure. However, that is far from the case, in fact, quite the opposite. Otis's mission was hailed as a groundbreaking achievement. Not only was it the first U.S. probe to land on the moon since the Apollo era, but it also marked the first commercial spacecraft to make direct contact with our celestial neighbor. While this is undeniably a major milestone, a week-long deployment of a damaged probe inevitably pales in comparison to the long-anticipated return of humans to the moon. So, when will that finally happen? When will NASA send astronauts back as part of the Artemis program? Unfortunately, patience is still required. Originally, the first Artemis moon landing was scheduled for last year, but the timeline has faced multiple delays. The most recent setback came in December when NASA Administrator Bill Nelson revealed that improvements were still needed for the Orion crew capsule, built by Lockheed Martin. This isn't entirely unexpected. During an unmanned test flight in 2012, cracks and material detachment were observed upon re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. To ensure safety, Artemis astronauts must complete a preliminary test flight before setting foot on the lunar surface. Specifically, the program includes a mission where astronauts will orbit the moon without landing, further pushing back the timeline. As a result, the long-awaited manned return to the moon is now expected no earlier than 2027. Despite these delays, if all goes according to plan, the Artemis program will make history. Christina Koch is set to become the first woman on the moon, accompanied by Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, and Jeremy Hansen.